Welcome to Get Savvy, the podcast for business owners who want to claim back their time through the power of delegation, streamlining, and productivity. I'm your host, Teesha, and I've got my co-host, Jo, here with me today to talk about security and virtual assistants for episode 8 of the Get Savvy podcast.
Yeah, this is a topic that I know is kind of front of mind for most business owners when they think about outsourcing to a virtual assistant, because we get it. It's a scary thing bringing someone else into your business. They're going to see behind the scenes. They're going to have access to your confidential information, your IP, your passwords, templates. Like that stuff's going to have to be handed over. So we get it. We totally get it. So we've got some questions that we would like you to ask your virtual assistant, or when you have a discovery call, like thinking about hiring a virtual assistant, so that you can know that your potential virtual assistant you're going to bring on has security front of mind.
Yeah. And in turn, giving you peace of mind to trust your virtual assistant as well. So our first question, and this one is very, very important. Well, they're all important, but this one is probably my number one tip or question. How do you manage logins and passwords? Because like Jo said, you're going to be handing over a lot of stuff to them, and this is going to include passwords for pretty much any tool and app that you're wanting them to access, whether that's emails, whether that's payroll and banking. There are some big ones in there. So how do they actually manage all of that? We don't want the virtual assistant to just be writing them down in a notebook and leaving them in their office. Like that's just not going to cut it these days. So yeah, how do they store those?
Yeah, this is like the number one tool that when I coach virtual assistants, this is the number one tool every virtual assistant must have. Like it's the first thing to sort in a virtual assistant business, so that when they have your passwords, they are going to have them securely in something that allows it to be encrypted, has a master password, has them secure in a vault. Because it makes me kind of panic thinking that there are virtual assistants who have, like Teesha said, a notebook or a Word document on their desktop.
Yep.
That gives me very anxious feelings that that someone could think that that is okay and that is secure, and kind of like naively think that there's no risk. We want you to hire a virtual assistant who has security as a top priority for you. So then you're like not bringing more risk into your business.
Yeah. Absolutely. So answers that you're sort of looking for to that question are people that actually have specific tools and apps for storing passwords, password vaults. So a few that we know of, the LastPass, 1Password, Dashlane, there are a bunch out there. You can have a Google yourself, but also if they're using a paid version, then that's even better. Some of the free versions are totally fine. They just have less features, but paid ones are better, especially if you're engaging with an agency, because then they have that central control of sharing folders and specific passwords out to team members, where some of the free versions don't allow that. But then, if a team member leaves, they can revoke their access to that team member as soon as they need to, and their office manager or whoever it is that's managing all of those passwords can, just be totally in charge of all of that access.
What you don't want is for them to say have a paid tool, but then just be sharing all of the passwords out to any of the team members. So like ask a few like follow-up questions. So if they do have a team, like who will see my passwords? What kind of system do you have for managing those passwords? Like an internal process. So ask a few more questions to really get into how seriously they are thinking about the security of your passwords and who has access to that. Another kind of thing that I think is that if someone has paid for a tool, then it kind of gives you that sense of how serious they are about the security of the passwords. So that can be a good indication for you as well.
However, if it is a freelancer, potentially they are getting everything they need with a free version, as long as it is a good free version of a tool. But yeah, definitely if it's an agency, you kind of want them to be having that paid account. Us, for example, we definitely have a paid account for LastPass, and our office manager manages all of the passwords, pops them in there, and then shares out the specific passwords, or not the passwords themselves, but access to use the passwords on sites that are needed to those team members that are working for that client.
Mm,
So our team don't actually see the password, which again gives our clients that security that, if that team member did leave, they haven't been looking at that password and they can't just go onto that site and type it in later once they've
mm.
left Savvy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that extra layer there as well.
Yeah. Something else you don't want them to rely on is saving the passwords into their Chrome. So
Yes.
when you first install Chrome, it automatically wants to suggest that you save the password inside Chrome. I think is it
Mm.
called a keychain? Is it, Tisha?
Yeah, I think depending on the device, and phones do it as well, and that one's called a keychain now.
Mm. So you don't want them to be saving them into the Chrome profile. You want them to have a separate tool into a paid, encrypted, secure
Mm.
place tool to contain that. Um, yeah, that shows how seriously they've kind of looked into it and researched and thought about it,
Yeah,
rather than relying on something like the Chrome storing it.
yeah. Yeah. And so a good follow up after that question as well is, how do you actually manage the security of your devices? So not just the passwords, and also not just the password on their laptop to get into the laptop. You want to know things like, do they have paid antivirus and malware protection and those kind of things as well.
Mhm.
At Strictly Savvy, we have a Meraki system, which means that we can again control all of our devices remotely, and we can actually wipe them remotely as well if we ever need to.
Yeah. And if your company that you're engaging has contractors, like asking them how they manage the security of the device when the company, VA company, doesn't actually own that device
Mm,
too, and they're using contractors. So ask them how they manage that. What have they got in place? What do they talk to their contractors about? What do they require contractors to have? All of that kind of stuff, because they may not necessarily control that centrally inside the business. Because laptops do get stolen. We had a team member and their laptop was stolen from their
yeah.
parents' house. And by having that knowledge that we had the Meraki system, we talked to our IT provider. They logged in, they had a look to see where that laptop was. Has it been used? No, it hasn't been used. They haven't been able to get into it, but they've tried. They've connected to Wi Fi. We could pass the details of the IP address and the Wi Fi network name onto the police.
Mm,
And because we knew that uh, the systems that we use at Strictly Savvy meant that everything, all the passwords are inside LastPass. They're not on a Word document, they're not on a desktop, not in the notes. They're not in the Chrome profile. So even if someone had managed to get in, they wouldn't be able to access any of their passwords, because
mm,
we could instantly, as soon as the team member told us their laptop was stolen, we changed the password of their LastPass.
yeah.
Instantly, none of the passwords are now accessible on that laptop. It's not like they're saved and they autofill or anything
Yeah.
like that, because the master password has changed.
Yeah.
It gave us full, like, a sense of security, because we know that we set up our laptop so that any downloaded files, they don't go into a downloads folder. They actually go into a working
Mm,
files folder, and that is inside our OneDrive. And so we can access that and change the password again, and not have that accessible on that laptop, in
mm,
terms of like stuff saved on the desktop or stuff saved locally in the hard drive of the computer. So that's how we teach all of our team members. That's how we set up our system, so that we can just wipe that laptop, and know that we're not just going to lose a whole bunch of
yeah.
data, because it's all in the cloud. We've got the system set up. So that's the kind of thing that you want your virtual assistant that you're potentially going to hire to be able to talk through, because they've thought about this, because it's a
Mhm,
priority. They've got a system, they've got a process for how they manage it. That's
mhm.
what you'll be looking for.
Yeah. We also quite often get questions around managing the security of the apps that we're accessing as virtual assistants. And especially for, again, those things like I mentioned, like your payroll apps and your banking apps, you don't really just want to be relying on one thing. And those sort of apps should have 2FA or multi factor authentication set up as well.
Mm,
This is becoming pretty standard for a lot of those ones, especially when you're dealing with money anyway. But yeah, enabling them for those sort of things is crucial. But we do usually recommend that your virtual assistant actually has a separate login for pretty much any app that you can give them a separate login to, if possible. This means that then you can see who's logging into what apps and you can sort of track what that person has done within that app.
mhm,
Then, if they have set up the multi factor for themselves as well, they aren't having to contact you every single time they're needing to log in.
mhm,
Um, then you can revoke it at any time. Again, sort of like the central control with the LastPass and things like that. That will then be in your control. If that virtual assistant does end up leaving or moving on for whatever reason, you can then change that password and shut down that account rather than
mm,
having to deactivate your own account or shut down your account and change the password or whatever it is.
mm.
So yeah, those are again those kind of things that you're looking for with security of apps.
Yeah. The next kind of question you want to ask them is how do they manage confidentiality within their team, if they
Mm,
do have a team? So you'll be looking for answers like, they're having a robust confidentiality policy in place that covers all of the team and their employees and their contractors, making sure
mm,
that they can express that there is a clause in all the contracts. And they should be willing to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement that you provide to them, just to give
mhm.
you that added layer of kind of protection and kind of officially saying I have confidential data and I
Yeah.
don't want you to share that with anyone. That if they have an issue with signing one of those, then that could be a red flag for you.
Mm. Yeah, and that obviously may not be necessary for your business all the time, but if you do have one and you do want them to sign, it shouldn't be like a major sort of stop point for them
Mm,
to, yeah, be
mm,
like, no, oh my God, I'm not going to do that. So, yeah, like Joe
yeah.
says, that might be a red flag if that's the reaction you get. But do remember as well that there is a lot of trust involved with hiring a virtual assistant, and that goes both ways. So they do actually want to do a good job for you as your virtual assistant. They also know that you, as the client, can cancel your service with them at any time. And obviously, that's not really the outcome that they're wanting. So do have faith. They value the relationship. They don't want to break any trust that they have with you. And if any of that is a concern to you, then just have a really open conversation with them, very direct, open conversation, so that there's no miscommunication and you guys are on the same page about everything,
Mm.
really.
Yeah, because I
Mm,
think too sometimes business owners think, "Oh, I don't want to like an external person coming into my business. I'm not going to hire a virtual assistant. I'd rather hire an employee." And
mm,
you know what? It's actually really hard to fire an employee if anything goes wrong. So, like, it's way easier to cancel the
mhm.
service and get rid of a virtual assistant than it is to, if there's some kind of issue that happens or arises with an employee, like they have a lot of security that they're going to be
Yeah.
able to keep their job, like a virtual assistant tends to, this is going to be a big call. Some people might not be happy with this. Virtual assistants tend to care more because the money that they receive as
Mm,
their pay is more at risk than
yeah.
an employee. An employee may not care as much,
Mhm,
potentially, because their job is safe. Um,
mhm.
yeah, so have faith that your virtual assistant wants to do a good job. They don't want to, breach your trust in any way. And have that conversation with them.
Yeah, definitely. And then lastly, another question is what kind of cyber insurance do you hold?
This is something that Strictly Savvy got maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Um, because we hear the news, we read articles of like, companies being held ransom,
Mm.
because of like data that has been, hacked into and kept. So we got cyber insurance back then because we just wanted that again, another layer of security and comfort, knowing that if anything did happen, we have the malware, like advanced version of our antivirus with the malware stuff in there. So I'm like 99% sure that that won't happen. We've got great systems, we've got everything in the cloud and backed up. So this is like kind of that next layer of protection,
Mm.
and if anything did happen, we had to pay $100,000, then we could have the insurance there knowing that we could pay that.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, that's really just everything that we've mentioned today is making sure that your virtual assistant is actually thinking about these things, that they aren't, using a Word document or writing it down, that they do have some measures in place to protect you. And just have that open conversation with them. If there are any extra questions that you want to add to these, then obviously go for that as well, so that you have peace of mind walking into that relationship with your virtual assistant. So, that is all our tips for today, episode 8 of the Get Savvy podcast. If you're looking for a virtual assistant company that has your security front of mind, then do go check out Strictly Savvy. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Get Savvy podcast. We'll see you next time.